Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Last week I did a little bit of work on the trailer, but the first thing that I did was I got this place a little bit better organized, because don't know if you guys saw, but in the last few videos this place was an absolute disaster. A couple of things that I did was cleaned up all of the pink insulation that was hanging out on the ground there, as well as look at the bench over here. I now have room to actually work on it. I got all of these screws in a nice container here. Yes, I did mark it screws, even though you can see through it. As well as all of the tools pretty much have their own toolbox now. As we go to the back here, you can see I organized all of the wood scrap, because some of this will be used, some won't, but it was like way out over here and I was tripping over it. I also moved the toolbox that will go on the front of the trailer so that we would have more room for the phylon to be able to maneuver it out of there when it comes time to cut that. Then of course we've got the back galley here, which didn't really need much cleaning, and honestly that took up 2 days of work just getting this place somewhat organized. So after I got done cleaning up, I decided that I had a few things on the trailer that could be done. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those things were. One of those things is I got to run over to the store, because this is one of the bolts that's supposed to hold the frame to the trailer itself. However, the very end of it is a little bit messed up and I can't get a nut on it. So I got to go and run and do that. All right, so it is time for me to connect these to these down here. Before I put the roof on, I wanted to connect these to these wires right here. However, I didn't have access to these big bad boys. This is a crimper for number 8 crimps. They are fairly large and there's no way that I could do it with any of the tools that I had. And my buddy, who's a farmer who runs big equipment, had one of these. So I have to connect this to here, but I have also got some heat shrink, and then once those are connected and onto there, I've even got a bigger heat shrink that will go over those two. So everything should be good and safe and ready to go. So the first thing I got to do is get these onto this end here. All right, so those are good. Now the trick is going to be doing that when it's under here, because I can't really hold them plus crank down on it very easily. All right, it's not perfect, but it'll be fine once I do this here. Shrink wrap this while the other one's still able to get away from it. Now you see why I'm not worried about those wires? I think this one here requires a bit more fire. Alright, so the next step in getting this wire to the outside of the trailer is going to be drilling a hole down here from the bottom up. Now, if I had a regular drill bit big enough, I could just use that. However, I think that these Irwin bits here are fantastic, and I'll be able to use one of these to get all the way through the 2 inches of flooring that I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the ends of these to the thickness of the wire, so that I can get as close as I can. And the reason why I want to get as close as I can is because, well, I'm going to need to put some caulking or something up in there so that it'll waterproof it and seal it off. And there we go. 5/8 I think is going to do it. So what I think I'm going to try to line it up to is this hole right here, because I would like to be able to have that come out of that hole right into the toolbox. So I'm going to probably put a hole somewhere in between here and the very center of the trailer. And there it is. Stay down here and make sure that wire comes out, will you? Hey, thanks for the help. All right, so now that that's coming out of there, I've got these little grommets to put into this hole here. However, that hole's not big enough, so I need to widen that, put these grommets in, and then I should be able to route that wire through these. Not sure if that's big enough already or not, so we'll give her a try. Yeah, I think that should work, actually. And that's one of today's projects done. Now normally I would go on to the next project right now. However, because I just got this place clean, I should probably keep it that way. My biggest toolbox now is the electrical stuff, all because of this project. All right, so unfortunately for the third project for today, I didn't get to record any of the process for you, but it was fairly simple. It was taking tiles, cutting them to size, and cutting off one edge. And now you might be saying, well, that doesn't look very big. That's because this here is the offcut. That means the actual piece is already in the trailer. So let's go take a look. So here we go. Of course, some of the tiles are dirty, don't mind that. But corner to corner here, we have the flooring tiles. And all the way up to the front, we go as well. However, I was short. That's what she said. By 2 tiles. So unfortunately, I can't finish out this project until I can get back to town and pick up another stack of these tiles. Now I'm not gonna throw these away right away because I think I might be able to use them in the cabinets or maybe even in the bottom of that centerpiece there. Just to give it a little bit nicer look if I decide to not put a door on that centerpiece, which I'm kind of leaning towards not. But all that's gonna come well after the pylon and the doors are on, because I need the extra pylon, if there is any, for the cabinet doors and such. And well, that all brings us to today, almost a week after those clips were recorded. Now the pylon is going to be floating, which means that there's not going to be any glue or anything holding it to the trailer. Now that does not mean, unfortunately, that we don't need a flat walled trailer. So what I'm gonna do is some of these screws up around here are not completely flat. So I'm going to either tighten them a little bit more, and if they sit and spin, I will be replacing them with a longer screw. Now there's also a few nails that need to be pounded in a little bit further, as well as some of this glue needs to be removed or sanded off of there. We also have a few places like this where there's wood damage done. And a big one is right here. So the first part of this project, I think, is I'm just gonna grab my hammer and go over all the little pin nails and make sure that they're all nice and flush. All right, so that might not work. All right, so it is only a very few on the very front around here that are sticking out bad enough that I wanted to fix them. And unfortunately, even with those long drywall screws, it's just not getting as flat as I would like. But because it's just a couple of them, it seems like at least one of these screws on each one got nice and flush. So I'm not gonna worry about it, and I'm not gonna try every single screw. But because it is so close to the edge here, those will be covered by the edge banding anyway. So I don't think there should be any issue with those at all. Just when you're doing yours, make sure that you have screws that have a lot of teeth or bite to them so that they have a lot to grab onto with that end grain. I got a few more to try to fix on the other side real quick, then we can get on to the bigger portion of this, which is the sanding. All right, now that I got the few screws that I needed to taken care of, as well as the nails, I gotta get out this big bad boy here. just my sander to sand down all them spots. Now remember kids, always wear the safety gear that you have available. All right, now you might be saying that looks pretty ugly, but the thing is, you're not gonna see any of this. And my main goal was to get it flat enough where at least the Phylon can go over little bumps instead of having to compensate for them by moving out. So now that I think everything is fairly flat, I'm gonna double check it by wiping it down with a rag. Let me put a circle around that. Found a little spot that's sticking out a little bit further, so I'm just gonna run the sander over that. I think I'm going to go ahead and mark this too and run the sander over that. So yeah, you guys probably don't want to see all of this process, so I'll be right back with you guys to talk about what's next. All right, so now that the trailer is fairly flat, I got all the glue bumps off of it and everything so that the Phylon can indeed lay nice and flat. Now for the question of the day. Do I paint this before I put the Phylon on it or not? Now I haven't seen anybody else do this. However, I do have a couple of latex exterior paints that need to be used up, which means I could paint this so that if any liquid ever did get in between the wood and the Phylon, it would hopefully be able to work its way out before it absorbed and sucked into the wall of the trailer. Which obviously you might be saying, well, duh, why don't you just do that? Well, the problem with that is that the outside wall is the same kind of plywood that I have on the inside, which if you take a look back at when I painted it, it had some issues with some bubbling and some cracking and some things that I needed to fix. Although I wouldn't need to wood fill any of it because the Phylon just floats on top of it, it could end up being a extra chore that I need to do with peeling off at least stuff that is bubbling. Now, two thoughts on that. One, it bubbles after I paint it and it gets fixed and I take it all off of there. Two, I just paint it, don't worry about it, and put the Phylon right over it since it shouldn't really be that big of a deal. Second, I just scrape off anything that does bubbles, repaint over it, and call it good. And the last option, of course, is just to go ahead and Phylon over this thing and just make sure that I do a good enough job where no liquid will get into it. Thing is, it's a trailer, things happen, they all eventually leak. So I would like to postpone as long as I can having to take the Phylon off and fixing anything on this trailer. So I am kind of leaning towards just saying forget it and doing it. However, I would like to know if you have this option, would you do it? Would you paint it and deal with the issues, or would you just put the Phylon right over bare wood as it is? Now, of course, I will be asking the DIY Teardrop Campers community what their thoughts are on it as well before I go ahead and paint it or I don't. Either way, I think the next step is going to be to cut down this Phylon. Now, it's about 6.5 feet tall. My trailer, on the other hand, is only 4 feet, which means I will have to cut this in two directions. The length of the trailer as well as the height of the trailer. So I think I'm going to be taking that over to the local fire hall because I talked to the chief there and they've got a nice big area there that they don't use, as said. So as long as I clean up after myself, I should be able to lay down one of these boards here, measure out the distance from the front or the back of the trailer, doesn't really matter, and cut it to width. Then I can go ahead and chop off a couple of feet of that Phylon. So hopefully you guys will hit that subscribe button, hit that bell so that you're notified when I do upload the next video and find out if I paint this or not. And until next time, as always, you have a good one.